Hi everyone, my name is Amberlin and today is kombucha making day. I've been making kombucha for my family for about 5 years now, and I brew about 8 to 9 gallons at a time. We go through a lot of kombucha, and if everyone was allowed to drink as much as they wanted, it would be gone in a few days. So I like to actually brew our kombucha a little longer so that it's a little more sour, so they don't drink it quite as fast, and it actually works quite well. We're allowed to have about half a cup of kombucha a day. Generally we take it before a meal to help with our digestion, or sometimes often just for pleasure. It's also really good after a workout because it helps cleanse the lactic acid from your body and prevents you from getting sore from working all those muscles. So I'll show you my kombucha cupboard and where I store my scobies. Voila! There are all of the jars of kombucha. This is actually some tinctures. This is a propolis tincture that I'm making with our bee propolis from my honey hives. Also some vanilla. And this is some wild peppermint covered in our honey, and it's been infusing for a while and it tastes amazing. You can just eat the leaves like that. And as you can see, someone's been sneaking into the kombucha already. I'm gonna take them out and we'll start making our new batch of kombucha. For those of you who might not know what kombucha is an ancient fermented tea and an elixir that is now enjoyed throughout the whole world because of its delightful taste and amazing health benefits. It's known to cure digestion problems, improve energy, balance cholesterol, and reduce inflammation and joint pain. It's also a powerful detoxifier. Some say it fights cancer due to its glucaric acid content. It also strengthens the immune system, aids in weight loss, is full of enzymes, probiotics, antioxidants, B vitamins, and a lot of vitamin C. It's best to drink your kombucha tea 15 minutes or so before your meal, but whenever is completely fine. I just realized I have 10 jars. I think this is actually the kombucha that I brewed with the Ivan chai tea that I made out of the fireweed leaves. I think I forgot about it. It'll be pretty sour. It's sour, but it still has a good amount of sweetness to it. So before I go ahead and start removing any of the kombucha or the scobies, I have to brew the tea. So this is the pot that we use. It's an 8-gallon pot. I fill it halfway full and I brew the tea, and then after the tea is brewed and the sugar's added, then I'll fill it right up with cold water, and that way I can get through the whole kombucha making process faster instead of letting a whole 8 gallons of tea cool. Some people will add ice cubes as well. So while the water's filling up, I'm going to talk about the tea a bit. We use organic West Jalinga gunpowder black tea. Green tea, white tea, or black tea are all fine. Preferably green tea or black tea. People have brewed kombucha using coffee, chaga, red ribus, honeybush teas, herbal teas of many different kinds, although after a couple times of doing that, the starter weakens, so it can't reproduce properly. The kombucha starter feeds off of the sugar and the caffeine in the tea. Our pot is full. Per gallon of kombucha, use 2 tablespoons or 8 tea bags. Now, because I'm brewing so many, I need a big tea bag. So I made this big tea bag out of cheesecloth, and I've been using it for a number of years now. I only wash it with water, by the way, and I have not washed my jars for a very long time. And generally when you make kombucha, you don't need to wash your stuff with soap. Hot water is perfect. That's all I use. Some people use white vinegar, but we don't have very many chemicals in our home, so we don't really need to worry about it. Do remember that any type of chemicals are hard on your cultures. So you want to keep that to a minimum, if not completely gone. In regards to that, you do not want to use chlorinated water or fluorinated water. If your water has that stuff in it, you can let it sit overnight to evaporate, or I think you can boil it for a certain amount of time. You can just look it up. Distilled water is best. This is our well water, so it's fine. I'm gonna get this boiling. Bring your water to a boil, and after you bring your water to a boil, you add your tea, and I let it steep for about 10 minutes. Some people do 5 minutes, some people do half an hour. It doesn't particularly matter, whatever suits you best. For the bulk amount of tea that I brew, I use just over a cup of black tea. I tie it with a hemp cord and I drop that in the pot. Generally, you don't want to have water boiling when you put your tea in. You want it to boil and then kind of cool down just slightly and then add your tea. So we'll wait for the water to boil. When you second ferment, generally that's to get a flavor and a fizz. So you need to make sure that you have ample enough sugar or sugary substance such as fruit to allow the yeasts in the kombucha to eat that sugar. We have a 2-quart jar here, and there's just a bit over half a cup of fruit. I could add more, but that's what we're doing today. And it depends how flavorful you want yours to be. Dried fruit is another very good option for second fermenting your kombucha. Raisins, apricots, blueberries are great, although one of our favorites is strawberry hibiscus and raspberry. Those are just classics. They're so good. Some people will even put turmeric in theirs. In addition to dried fruit and fresh fruit, fruit juice is another great option. Also honey or a bit of sugar added to the second fermentation adds a really good fizz. Okay, so these are all flavored. This is an apple, cinnamon, clove, spice, rosehip hibiscus, lemon ginger, and raspberry from our own raspberry patch. And we picked these rose hips last year. You can flavor your kombucha with anything basically that you want. It's very, very versatile and flexible, although you don't need to flavor it at all. You can drink it straight out of the jar, like someone else was before. All right. Our water is simmering, which is good enough for me. And now we add in our tea. And I let it steep for 8 to 10 minutes. Cheese utensils come in very handy. And after this, we'll add the sugar. I like to add the sugar after brewing the tea. Some basic rules when brewing kombucha, especially when dealing with your culture, the scoby. You want to generally keep your scoby in some of the tea, the fermented tea, so it doesn't dry out and it just helps protect it. When dealing with ferments, it's pretty flexible and they're pretty hardy. Always want to have your brew covered with a cheesecloth or a paper towel so that bugs, especially fruit flies, don't get into it and destroy it. And also, you don't want your scoby to touch anything metal. Plastic, glass, or ceramic work very well. Most people say only use white or cane sugar when brewing kombucha. Those are awesome choices. You can also brew a type of kombucha. It's called June, but they brew it with honey instead of sugar and the alcoholic content is a little bit higher. Kombucha is non-alcoholic, but like any ferment, there's a little bit of alcohol. And as mentioned before, do not use herbal teas if you're wanting to continue the process of making scobies. I had tried doing some chaga and it didn't work very good. Although I did do my Ivan chai tea and it worked awesome. It's caffeine free and still the culture just loved it and grew on it very, very well. So that's interesting. If we ever can't get black tea, we can make a whole bunch of our own tea with our fireweed leaves. This is my Ivan chai scoby. You see it's a bit of a lighter greenish color actually compared to the other black teas. It's been about 10 minutes and I'm gonna take the tea out and add the sugar. 1 cup per gallon. This is white sugar. Generally we use organic cane sugar for our cooking, but because this is so fermented and I leave it extra long to make it a little sourer, like all the sugar gets eaten up. So we don't worry about it too much. And it's also not like we're drinking gallons and gallons of it, so it's also what Sally Fallon recommends, if you know who she is. You just stir that in. Now I'm going to take it to the sink and fill it up with really, really cold water. We'll fill it up to about here. Always leave a little bit of extra space because you need to put 1 cup of starter liquid per gallon of kombucha. And the starter liquid is basically just the brewed kombucha. The starter culture just gives the whole culture a boost to get going. It's like a little push. The next step is taking out all of the kombucha. So I take off the lids. It's imperative to keep it covered all the time so the fruit flies don't get in and lay eggs and destroy the culture. And because of that, lots of people will keep a scoby hotel. I used to do that, but I don't anymore. I'm going to stir the juice all together to mix all the yeasts together so I get a well-balanced starter culture to put into my pot. Yes, generally you do not use metal but because this is such a quick contact, it's been fine for me. So, do at your own risk. Anyway, just stir it gently from the bottom. Lots of yeast settle on the bottom of the jar. They string on the bottom of the scoby. Stir it all up. You want to be careful that you don't drip your kombucha juice because it's really sticky and it's not nice to work with. So I always am very, very picky on where I drip, and always to drip into the jar and nowhere else. Now, what we're gonna do is I'm gonna start filling up the jars. This is still a little warm right now. I'm just gonna wait to add the starter culture. You do not want your new tea to be too warm because it can damage the live enzymes and such in the starter culture. Now we're gonna fill our jars for the second fermentation and the flavoring and the fizziness. And then I just leave the scoby at the bottom. Sometimes I take them out before I stir, but it is kind of easiest if I can just stir it all and not have to deal with the scobies. When the scobies get too big, then you want to cut them down a bit. So this brown culture here, this is the mother scoby, and she gave birth to a baby scoby over the last month of brewing. That's pretty long. Generally, people do it for a week to 10 days. Maybe 2 weeks, and that'll give you a sweeter tea. If your culture's too big, and I could even do this now, because you don't need a huge scoby to continue on the batch. You can just peel off the baby scoby, discard the mother scoby, and continue on with the baby. But I'm dripping. You don't need to be really gentle when removing them. They're attached, but they're not like deeply attached. So just, you can kind of rip it off. You could use a knife if you need, but don't be too picky on being gentle. When you discard them, you can give them to your chickens. Some people dehydrate them as doggy chews. You could eat them. They'd be like kefir buds kind of, and they'd have enzymes and probiotics in them. They're good for your compost, and that's exactly where the tea goes too. We just put it out to the compost of the chickens. If you ever see mold growing on top of your scoby, you gotta dump it. I got mold growing on my first culture because I started it from a dehydrated scoby, and that didn't work very well. Got these scobies from someone in Calgary, and they've been brewing perfectly for about 4 or 5 years now, and I've also been able to sell lots away. If you're doing the second fermentation, you have to seal it. You can use canning lids, but over time they will rust and just... So Mom found these. They're plastic with a nice rubber rim, and they seal very well, and that's what we use. Tighten them up really good. Different locations will cause the yeasts to react a little differently. I have not had problem with a jar exploding for a couple years now. You want to check every day to 2 days and make sure that pressure isn't building up too much in your jar. And to do that, you just burp it. That's what it's called, burping it. Just undo it and the air will go tss, and then you just seal it back up. Generally, the second fermentation lasts 3 to 5 days. You may already have guessed it, but we use these jars because there's so many of us. And to fill up little jars like this would just take too much time. You can totally do it. It actually helps make it fizzier, I've found. The tops like this are awesome. Anything that you can seal really good. You just put your fruit in there and cover it with your kombucha. Something else that we've noticed with the cheese making and the kombucha cannot be in the same open room as the cheese because it makes the cheese all funky because of the different yeast strains. It's been fine with our kombucha being in the cupboard, but I can no longer leave the second fermented kombucha here on the counter. I have to move it to the other room so it doesn't bother our cheese. And it's pretty similar with the kefir. The kefir has to be in another room too. Welcome to the world of wild ferments. Now is the time that we add our starter culture. Generally I use 1/2 gallon to 3/4 of a gallon, but you want 1 cup per gallon of kombucha. Give it a good swish to mix up all those yeasts. Make sure it doesn't drip. Give it a stir, and now we pour all of this tea back into the jars where it will sit in the cupboard for 2 to 3 weeks. Kombucha is going to sit at room temperature until we drink it, although you will probably want to transfer yours to the fridge after 3 to 5 days. It'll be carbonated and sweet and a little tangy and just delicious, all ready to work wonders in your body. And there you have it. That's how we make kombucha and how you can make kombucha as well. Kombucha is a wonderful drink. We really, really love it. It's wonderful to take first thing in the morning to just cleanse your system and get your body ready to digest all the day's food. It's an excellent replacement for soda pop or any type of sugary drinks because it can have that fizz and the flavor with none of the negative health effects. We hope you can start brewing your own kombucha. Till next time.